This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Good morning and welcome to the Office of Teaching and Learning webcast. I'm Amanda Ellis and I'm so happy you're able to tune in. I have with me today my colleague Emma Riley, and Emma will be here introducing some really interesting topics about deaf and blindness, and I think you're going to learn so much this morning. But before we get started, I want to remind you to please look at the bottom of your screen, log in to gosoapbox.com so we can capture your questions or any additional information you may be asking or need to know of our guests today, and we'll be able to answer those by the end of the webcast. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Emma to introduce her guests. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Amanda. Will you two please join me? Good morning. Hello, good morning. I am pleased to have the opportunity to introduce two wonderful speakers for deaf-blind interveners. We have Donna Snyder from the DeafBlind project that we work with. Welcome. And here we have Peggy Morris from the DeafBlind School for the Deaf-Blind as well. Here we go. Thank you.
Good morning. Come and join us. We look good? We're good? All right. So we can go ahead, and this is how we flip through.
This is a demonstration.
All right, so there we are. That's who we are. Peggy works for the Kentucky School for the Blind. She's with the Outreach Department, and then I'm at the Kentucky Deaf-Blind Project, and we're located at UK. So we'll go ahead and start with, before we even talk about interveners, we wanted to talk a little bit about deaf-blindness and what that means. So looking for a definition for deaf-blindness, the one that we have on here is well known. It's a combined vision and hearing loss. It's to the extent that neither of these primary information gathering senses, the vision and hearing, which are our distance senses, compensates for the loss of another sense. It's a disability of access to visual and auditory information about the environment. So if you think about the kids that we work with who are deafblind, really beyond their fingertips, they're not really sure what's going on beyond their fingertips. They may have some information, they may have more vision or more hearing, but they're not taking information the same way we are. So it is definitely a disability of access. And also incidental information, you know, all that information that we learn just by having people pass us or listen to hear conversations go by, or environmental noises that sighted and hearing students receive automatically without any effort. It's not readily accessible to students with that combined vision and hearing loss.
So this next slide shows typical learning versus deafblind learning, and we have two different triangles. The one on the left is typical learning, and you see it's divided into three sections. The top section, direct hands-on learning, the middle section, which is a little bit more secondary learning, and then the bottom section of the triangle is incidental learning. So a typical learner, that person that doesn't have vision or hearing loss, they're going to learn most of what we learn incidentally, so all that environmental information that nobody really teaches you. Now, the triangle that's inverted on the right is an individual with deaf-blindness, and you see it's flipped. Most of what they learned is direct hands-on learning. Secondary learning is about the same as a typical learner, and then incidental learning is the smallest portion of the triangle. So what that really says is that we need to get into these individuals' bubbles. Like Donna said, they only see and hear as far as their vision and hearing extends. So think of them, a child with deaf-blindness, that they have a bubble around them, and their learning only extends as far as that bubble goes. So we really have to get into that bubble and directly teach them the information that they're missing, that incidental learning.
Right, and just adding on to what Peggy said too, is that concept development, you know, how we form concepts in our minds is because our vision and hearing permit us to reach out into our environment. For the students that we work with who are deafblind, those concepts develop differently than how we develop. So what we're expecting from our students is very difficult because they're not taking in the information the same way.
So one other thing to add too, that's a really good point, Donna, is that sometimes these children, their sense of the world and their view of what's going on around them is very different and might be a little bit warped. And I don't know if warped's the best word, but their understanding of what goes on around them isn't going to be the same as an individual with typical vision and hearing. And so again, really stressing that's why we've got to get in that bubble and get that direct hands-on learning to help with that concept development.
Right, I agree.
Of Wirecast.
All right, let's go to the next one. So I put this slide in because these are some of the kiddos that we work with here at the Kentucky Deaf-Blind Project. And really, deaf-blindness doesn't look like one thing. It looks like many different things. Our kiddos, their vision may, vary from severe to mild. Same with their hearing. It may go from mild to profound. And any combination of those puts those students on our census. So we have this magical census. The Kentucky Deaf-Blind Project has this magical census. And when a student is referred to us, we put them on the census, and they receive free services from, there's only 3 of us, across the entire state of Kentucky. And the reason I'm telling you this is that if you look at child counts, so if you look at the Kentucky Department of Education, their child count for how many children are listed as deafblind in the state, you might come up with 5 students in the entire state. But if you look at our census and see how many children qualify, we have almost 150. We're about at 145 right now. So there's a big discrepancy, and it's because how they're labeled on the IEP. Most students are labeled as multiple instead of deafblind. But there are a lot of students across the state who use our services. So these are some of our kiddos that we work with. And some students use sign language. Some use tactile sign, some are just auditory learners, some use Braille, some don't use Braille. It's a real mix. And one picture in particular that I love here is it's the 4th picture over of the 2 girls together. Our kids don't get that opportunity to be together with other students like them, so once a year we try and get them all together so that they can make friends and develop lifelong friendships. So we added that in there just so you could see some of our kiddos. So intervention. As Peggy was showing before, intervention for children who are deafblind, they have to connect them to the world. It has to provide access to clear and consistent visual and auditory information. It has to support the support there for development and the use of both receptive and expressive communication, and also to support for social and emotional well-being. A lot of times our people will think of Helen Keller when they hear deafblind, but our kids a lot of times need a lot more input. The intervention has to be systematic, and it has to be well planned out. As Peggy talked about incidental learning, we can't depend on incidental learning for them to take in information. So you have to plan very well, and it has to be systematic. Okay, I'm good.
So what exactly is an intervener? And I know most folks have probably not heard that word. So an intervener, a skilled intervener, as it says on the slide, facilitates a child's access to environmental information. They work as a bridge between the child and the environment around them. They support the development and use of communication, and whatever that communication mode is. Again, as Donna said, if it's American Sign Language, if it's total communication, if it's tactile, symbol, verbal, whatever that communication is. And they also promote social and emotional well-being. And so, again, bridging those social opportunities for the children with other children. And they provide that one-to-one access to sensory information. Again, that incidental information that's unavailable to those children whose vision and hearing are limited or absent. They help the kids know what's going on around them and attach language and meaning to all of those experiences. And really, again, as I said, foster those social and emotional and relationships and empower the children to have some control over their lives, because as we know, these little friends don't always have control. They're moved from here to there and don't always have a voice in what's happening in their lives. And one thing about an intervener, that again is a person who is really trained in deaf-blindness via different training modes that are available. And I've had people say to me, well, we don't want our student to have a one-to-one aid because they'll become too dependent. We want them to be independent. Well, the role of an intervener is to foster interdependence, not dependence on them.
I think that's a really important point. When you think of, and I'm sure you've come to the conclusion that an intervener is one person that's working with the student one-on-one. And a lot of times we do get that question, are they going to become over-dependent? And a skilled intervener does not do that. They promote that interdependence and connects them with their friends in the classroom, with the teachers, with the lady in the front desk, with the librarian. That's what they do, is they are the connector in between everyone.
So this next slide shows an intervener at work, and hopefully the video will work. This is a little friend of mine that I worked with in another state. I met her when she was 2. Her mother had moved from her hometown to the city where a residential school for the deaf, the school for the deaf and blind was on the same campus, and she had moved to get her daughter into a preschool there. And at the time I was working at the DeafBlind project in this particular state and was running the intervener training program. And so my little friend McKenna, she immediately started, I don't think the video is going to work, that's a big bummer. Anyways, McKenna started out from day one with an intervener who was being trained on skills in deaf-blindness. And she was a child who pretty much, what she wanted to do when she started preschool was she wanted to be rocked back and forth and bounced up and down. She really, really needed that sensory input. Sorry guys, the video's not gonna work. So anyways, she went from needing this bouncing up and down to being rocked back and forth to swinging. She just needed so much sensory input. She has very little functional vision. She has dual cochlear implants. And so very much needed the total communication approach. So her intervener uses auditory, she uses hand under hand, and again that's a key term we want you all to remember, hand under hand, sign language. So now she is 9 years old, I believe, and she still has a trained intervener, and she has language. In this video clip, she's reading a book, an M book, and the intervener is using a really nice version of hand under hand and is showing the McKenna the book, and she'll say the word mouse, and then McKenna repeats and goes mouse, and then McKenna turns the page herself. And so you can tell through the video that they've worked really hard on this together, and it's not the intervener turning the pages. The intervener's just facilitating it, and really McKenna has the power and the control over what's happening in the situation. And I'm very sorry about the video.
Yeah, I'm hoping that maybe when they post it, maybe it would work. Oh, they're shaking their head yes.
Oh, so, yes, it will work. Yay.
So when it's posted, you all will be able to go and see McKenna on there. And it's a beautiful video. And it does illustrate the hand under hand, which is really important when working as an intervener.
Yeah, and if I can say one thing, so much credit goes to McKenna's mom, because if, it hadn't been for her moving and really facilitating the situation, McKenna wouldn't be where she is today. So, we really want to give a shout out to the parents for what they do and what they have to go through every day.
All right, so we'll go on. So I'm going to give you just a little history about what an intervener, how it came to be. So the concept of an intervener services for individuals who are deafblind came about in Canada. I think it was in the 1970s, and it's been developing as a practice in the U.S. for the past decades. So intervener services are provided by interveners, typically a paraeducator, and we've already talked about it's a person who has specialized training, in-depth training in deafblindness, and is working one-to-one with the infant, child, or youth who is deaf-blind. So in school settings, the intervener serves as a member of the student's educational team. So they probably, we would hope, be part of the ARC, IP development, and work with everyone there, including the teacher and all support services. You know, the speech therapist, the OT, the PT, deaf, hard of hearing, the vision. They would be a part of all that conversation. So right now in Kentucky, well, there's several states that have intervener services written into their IEP. Not all states do, and we'll talk a little bit more about Kentucky later on. So in these states, they've had to set up training for individuals who want to go through it, so that the need for the interveners, that they have the people to fill those spots. There's other states following right now. I know Utah was one of the first ones, Texas, Illinois, and I think Minnesota are all there, where it's written into as part of their IEP.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
And so a lot of times we'll get the question of, well, can't an educational interpreter serve, fulfill that role? So what's the difference between an educational interpreter and an intervener? And again, I just want to clarify that I am not an educational interpreter, so I apologize if I misspeak, but so an educational interpreter effectively communicates classroom information about the teacher, about the students, about the deaf student, and other hearing students in the classroom. They communicate appropriate language level and mode of communication, again, whether that's American Sign Language, total communication. They help to implement the IEP, they facilitate and support social communication, and educational interpreters are considered a related service.
Yes.
So I know some people think, okay, interpreters just interpret the spoken word. Well, an educational interpreter does a little bit more than that. But now, again, an intervener works consistently with one student, whereas an educational interpreter, there may be 2 or 3 or more students that are deaf or hard of hearing that they're providing the communication for. So again, consistently, an intervener works one-on-one with a student, and I think there's a few words that I'm sitting here thinking I'd love for you all to remember by the end of this, and one is consistency and access, and there was another one, but
it'll pop
back up. Yeah. Again, an intervener has training and specialized skills in deafblindness. They serve as a bridge to the world, again, bringing all that incidental information. Incidental.
That's it, incidental.
Yep. They help gather information, help the student to learn and build on concepts and skills. They help to establish relationships that lead to independence. Absolutely. And again, they foster interdependence. So those are some of the differences between an educational interpreter and an intervener.
And that's a good word too, is interdependence, to add to our list. So then also sometimes people may ask us, what's the difference between a classroom assistant, a paraprofessional versus an intervener? Why can't that person, or can't we rotate people in and out to work with that individual who's deafblind in the classroom? As Peggy just beautifully shared what an intervener does, that one-on-one relationship is so important. It builds that trust that this child will begin to reach out past their fingertips and start to explore their environment more. A classroom assistant usually is working with a group of students. Their expectations, their jobs in the classroom are a little bit different. They may be working with a small learning group. They may be setting up for lunch. They may be walking students to another place. And sometimes those classroom assistants will rotate in and out. The intervener works directly one-on-one with the student who's deafblind in the classroom. Remember, connecting them to their environment. As Peggy said, I mean, it's very important for them to develop that trust. She talked about her little friend McKenna and how they started with all her sensory challenges and swinging and getting her to trust this person who was going to later start bringing information into her. They have that specific training how to work with someone who's deafblind.
So how do you determine if a student needs an intervener? There is, one of my favorite websites is the National Center on Deafblindness. I call it the Toys R Us of deafblindness, but Toys R Us is closing, so never mind. Maybe the Target of deaf-blindness, but it's a wonderful website. They're a wonderful agency that they provide anything and everything regarding deaf-blindness. So I think we put that as one of the resources for you at the end. But they have a wonderful IEP tool, and again, if you watch this on YouTube, you'll be able to access. We put a link in there for you, and it kind of guides you through information on where intervener services should be. They can be either under related services or supplementary aids. And we know that you can't put a person in an IEP, but you can put those accommodations and aids that the student needs that really supports the need for this one-to-one person, this intervener.
This tool, like Peggy said, this is one of my favorite tools because you can open it up and it will guide you through, and it asks you questions about the student. What's their vision like? But not just what is their vision. Is it 20/200, or are they low vision? Are they considered blind? It asks you how do they work in a classroom, a lighted classroom, a dimly lighted classroom. How do they that's okay. How do they function with their hearing? Can they hear someone who's further away? Do they need to be close? It asks a whole bunch of different questions, and they're very in-depth about how the student is functionally working in their classroom. And they also ask how they're doing it at home, because you always want to get input from home and from parents and family to add in. But the IEP tool is very easy to use, and you can go through. Okay.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Okay, so where to document in the IEP? So we talked about that it should be in related services or supplementary aids and services. It depends on the state. And then as such, that can help children who are deafblind advance appropriately to obtain their goals, be involved in making progress in the general education curriculum, and be educated to participate with other children without disabilities. So I'll talk really quickly here because I'm getting the thumb that I need to start speeding up. This is my friend Max. Max lives here in Kentucky. He's part of a family. He enjoys school and he loves big dogs. And these are a couple pictures of him. He also has Charge syndrome and is on our census. So I asked his mom to give me a quick quote, and she gave me a very long one, so this is a partial quote. And this is Max with his intervener, and she's using the tactile symbols to make choices, to talk about, involved with literacy, to maybe bring up a conversation about something that happened previously with him. So Max's mom shares, when Max has the opportunity to communicate, he flourishes. He signs more, learns more, and is happier. Problem behaviors dissolve when you are able to negotiate with him in a language he understands. Interveners have been critical in allowing my son to access his curriculum. But without a specific person dedicated to learn his tactile language, he is in his own silent, dark prison. And I'll just real quick, and I know they want us to finish up, but he's very interesting. If you sign into his left hand, he responds with his right hand and sign. He does Braille and uses tactile symbols.
So what's going on in Kentucky? So what's being worked on is looking to add an intervener box in the IEP document. Big goal is to create an intervener guidance document and to explore intervener training options, which there are some available through the National Center on Deaf-Blindness. Have these wonderful free, did I say free, training modules, 26 or 27, all about intervention strategies. They're self-paced, and I think Donna's looking at developing a Kentucky cohort at some point. So
right. We're absolutely going to look for a Kentucky cohort and maybe look into using them for training here in Kentucky. So this is us. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm at UK. That's also our website, but there's my phone number and my email, or contact Emma Riley here at Kentucky Department of Education. And I can't thank them enough for having us here, and for Emma to invite us, and for Peggy to agree to come and do it with us.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies, and Emma, and everyone who was able to come today. Lots of great information, and please take advantage of these resources and these experts in the field. I know you have students that need additional assistance, or you may not know what to do, so it's really important that you take advantage of the people we have here in Kentucky who can really assist you to provide the best for our students. So before we log off, I'll give you just a couple more minutes to send any questions you may have, but I'll remind you of 5 things to know before you go. If you notice, the EDS guidance is available. The data will be gone after June 30th. So the quick reference cards are available as a guide for the process of printing or saving this information. We will have that link. You can see that on the PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, Kathy White will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Also, this is just another reminder, we had brought this up before, but the Learning from Kentucky's Classroom 2018 conference will be taking place September 7th through the 8th in Lexington. The application is available online for you to apply to present a session. We ask that it be focused around next generation assessment, teacher leadership, innovative professional learning practices, implementation of standards, educator growth and effectiveness, or systems improvement. And the deadline for that is April 1st by midnight. So please, we'd love to get your applications in and learn the best practices you're using in your schools and districts. If you do have a question, Carly Baldwin will be available to answer your questions. Also, the Certified Evaluation Plan, submission guidelines, and supports are available online. So in response to the changes of KRS 156557 and our 704 KAR 3370, school districts are asked to make revisions to their Certified Evaluation Plan and align it with the new Kentucky Framework for Personnel Evaluation. If you have any questions or needs as you develop that with your 50/50 committee, the Certified Evaluation Planning webpage is available on this PowerPoint. You can click on that and it will guide you through any of your updates you may have, as well as webinars that you and your 50/50 committee can utilize to develop that plan and submit to KDE. If you have questions, you can reach out to Christine Meisberger or Todd Davis, and they are also listed as your contacts. And then the last reminder is the through course task expectations for submission. So as previously shared in the Commissioner's Monday message, every science teacher grades K through high school should facilitate at least 2 through course tasks during the 2017 school year. Each district will select and submit 1 piece of typical student work for each of the 2 different tasks at each grade level, and submissions are due by June 15th. The district assessment coordinators may begin submitting work now by visiting the Science TCT Student Work Submission site. We do have the link onto this and you will be able to easily find it. Further directions regarding the submission of work samples can be obtained by viewing the March 15th DAC webinar through the KDE Media portal. And again, we have that linked as well on the webinar to walk you through this process. Collected student work will be used for teacher professional learning and will not be used to evaluate teachers, schools, or district. All information, personal information, will be redacted and nothing will be used against anyone. It's truly an opportunity to learn and guide our work as we move to a new style of assessment. For technical questions related to the student work submission, contact Karen Davidson. She can be found on the Global. And for submission requirement questions, please contact Leanne Pickerel. Just a reminder, if your district requires all schools to do additional pieces of submission, KDE only wants the 2 student pieces per teacher K through high school, and we don't need additional pieces. So please work that out. If you are at a building and you are unsure, work with your district assessment coordinator. And then the last, last topic, the next OTL webcast will be March 20th, and the information will be forwarded once the next date actually and the topic is set. There are a lot of things going on, as you know, with legislation moving and change with assessment and accountability and new standards development. We want to make sure and select the topic that will best meet your needs for this time of year. And it looks like there are no other questions. And so I want to thank you for logging in today. Know that within 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to receive an email with this webcast link. Also, you will have the PowerPoint and will be able to access the information that the lady shared. Other than that, have a great day and we'll see you soon.